Hey, welcome back, Sawdusters! It's a term I'm trying out to represent all of y'all that come here twice a month and support me by watching these videos. Let me know down in the comments what you think. This is gonna be the biggest project I've ever tackled on YouTube. It's basically a rolling base cabinet with a stack of drawers on one side and the rest of it reserved for storing wine bottles. It's gonna get a granite countertop, so that's one thing I don't have to build. And with 2 weeks before I go back to work, I think this will be the last project of the summer. Now I know you're thinking, how on earth is this project gonna take 2 weeks to build? But I've got my girls with me for the rest of their summer vacation, and I promised them I wouldn't spend more than 2 hours a day working in the shop. Assuming I don't work on weekends either, that gives me 10 days or 20 hours to get this project done. Which should be enough time. I've got goals mapped out for the first few days, but we'll have to see how it goes and take it from there. Which is the same approach I use in my classroom. It's always good to have a plan, but you have to be ready to make changes based on what's happening in the moment. In fact, this drawing is more of an inspiration than an actual blueprint. The little details and precise measurements will likely change as we go. But day one isn't affected by any of that. Today, I just want to rough cut some of the bigger pieces out of 3/4 inch plywood using a circular saw. And then tomorrow, I'll be cleaning up those cuts, getting it down to size using the table saw. With a little bit of luck, day two will also involve rabbits and dados to begin the joinery of the carcass. When you're cutting plywood with a circular saw, always have good side down. This will reduce tear out and keep the finished face looking as good as possible. I made these saw guides in my debut video on YouTube 7 years ago. Can't recommend watching it, but they get the job done. And with a coat of paste wax for the first time, I think they'll work better than ever. The wine bar is supposed to be 3 feet tall, but taking off for the granite countertops and the wheels underneath, rough cutting to 33 inches will still give me plenty of wiggle room to clean it up at the table saw tomorrow. I've got a fine-tooth blade set up in the circular saw, depth set to about an 1/8 inch more than I need, and I've got support from underneath on either side of the cut. Now I tend to believe that personal safety is just that, personal. But I do like wearing safety glasses when running a circular saw. The way the blade spins throws the dust right at you. And I always like wearing hearing protection. That way I can keep what hearing I have for as long as I can. Oh man, with the paste wax on there, it is like night and day. I can't believe I've been 7 years without doing that. Now it's just like skating across ice. Let me set up for a couple more cuts, and day one will be done. Something I picked up from Matthias Wandel on YouTube. So when you're cutting up a sheet of plywood, just cut out the shape you need. That way what's left over is as big as possible. The pieces are rough cut and tomorrow we'll dial in those measurements. Day two and I'm already changing the plan. Want to build out the thickness of the walls. For the middle, that's 1.5 inches. For the outer, that's 1.25 inches. Makes more sense later on. So I need to cut some pieces out of 1/2 inch plywood, and even then I still need to rip some thin strips at the table saw to pad out the thickness. I'm all set up and ready to go. Once again, I'm only cutting out the pieces I'm ready for. Yesterday I made one bad cut that's got me wondering if I even have enough wood. So I drew up a cut layout for this sheet. It's a little crazy looking, but it should be manageable. As you can see, we're a little under that target of 1.25 inches. So we're gonna need some strips of wood, about 3/32 of an inch thick. And I'll get those out of a single 2x4 at the table saw. Each of the walls will get 5 shims. I'll do most of the glue up off camera, clean up the shop a little bit, and call it a day. Finally ready to cut some pieces down to final size. I've known for a while that the floor and outside walls are going to be 15 inches deep, but I didn't know how tall those walls were going to be because I was unsure of the thickness of the bottom. See, I want to double up on the thickness of the floor by using strips of plywood underneath, but after making one wrong cut on the sheet of 3/4 2 days ago, the only part of the sheet left that's 4 feet long had the grain running in the wrong direction. So I searched through my wood pile and found a piece that was plenty big enough, cut it down with the circular saw before ripping it into strips at the table saw. And since it's construction grade plywood, I cleaned up both faces at the planer. So now I know that the 2 layers of the floor along with the wheel are 4¼ inches tall, and I'll be cross-cutting these walls to 31¼ inches. It's getting a little late in the day, so I'll get these 3 pieces cut down to dimension, but rabbits and dados will have to wait until tomorrow. I love it when the joinery starts. I know this project's nowhere close to done, but when you're working on joining pieces together, it just feels like real progress. Today's goal is really just to cut these 2 rabbits and 1 dado that hold the walls of the cabinet. I'm using my router jig that I made some years back. It's my most popular video on YouTube. Let me get this base turned around. It will be 2/3 of the way done for the day. Since I'm using this jig to make a rabbit, it's pretty important that I have this cut off, otherwise half the jig would be unsupported. Let me get it lined up and clamped down. I like to use 3 clamps with this jig. First one holding the jig to the material, and then 2 clamps holding the jig to the work table. I'll be making 6 passes with the router. First 2 passes on each edge, and then 2 passes to clean out the middle. And then the final 2 passes again on the edge, just to clean everything up. If you've watched enough of my videos, especially the older ones, maybe you recall that the switch on my router's broken, which is why I've got it plugged into the router table, allowing me to use this switch. I kind of wish I still had my foot pedal switch, but I forgot that this was the one instance where I still need it. For everything else, having it plugged into the router table is perfect. The middle wall is 1.5 inches thick, whereas the two outers were 1.25 inches, so I need to reset this jig for that new dimension. The beauty of this jig is that to set it to any dimension, you use the material that you're going to make a dado for, stick it in between the two guides, close them up, and tighten the knobs. This will ensure that that dado is the perfect width. My final tip is if you're working with a plywood that has a pretty thin veneer, you can score the edges of the dado with a sharp knife, and this will help that veneer separate cleanly. This may take 7 passes instead of 6 because the dado's a little bit wider, but otherwise there's nothing new to see. In fact, let's just skip it with a little bit of magic. Haha, never gets old. This middle wall has not been cut to final dimension yet, and that's because I want to install the back first, which requires cutting rabbets on the outside walls and bottom, and that is tomorrow's project. I ended up recutting these rabbets so that they're 1/2 inch deep. Probably not a bad idea to do that in 2 passes. Now with the walls in place, we can pull a tape to see how wide the back needs to be. Looks like 43 7/8 will do just fine. I'll use the circular saw like before, but this time I won't be cleaning it up at the table saw, so I need to take a little extra time to make sure I've got the right measurement and that all the cuts are perpendicular. Oh man, these cuts are square. It is getting late here on Friday night. Final push of the week. I've already cut the middle wall down to size that is width and height, and I added rabbets to the tops of the walls to hold strips that will support the granite. I combined the strips together using pocket screws to make a little bit of a frame. Now I just need to give everything a light sanding, and this weekend I'll glue it all together. New day, new week, new shirt, new haircut. I have been cutting up all the solid lumber for the wine rack, the face frame, and other trim boards. I started by getting a rough cross cut with a circular saw before taking them to the table saw to rip them down to 2.5 inches, 2 inches, and 1.5 inches. The boards for the wine rack and face frame will get planed on each side just to clean them up. The thickness doesn't really matter as long as it's uniform. But the trim boards need to be 1/4 inch thick, and rather than planing away 1/2 inch of material, I'll resaw them at the bandsaw and then just clean up that cut. To make resawing a little bit easier, I want to draw a center line down the middle of the board, so I threw together this jig. It's a little bit off center, but that's okay because after drawing a line down one side, you can flip the jig around, do it again, and now you have 2 lines with the center of the board being in between. I've got my biggest blade set up on the bandsaw, so I think we'll start with the smallest board, get a little bit of practice, and work up from there. It is the end of week 2. On Wednesday, my wife had surgery. She's been on bed rest ever since. And between taking care of her as well as my 2 daughters, it turns out I don't have the energy to come down here and keep working every day. So I'm going to wrap this video up here. But in the next video, I'll be finishing the face frame, building the drawers, and also making the racks that will actually hold the wine bottles. I don't know if that will be 2 weeks or 4 weeks from now with the new school year starting up. But once that video's done, I will link it right here. For now, that's just a video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. So I appreciate your patience, and I hope you have a great week. And as always, get out there and make some sawdust.